Human Rights Education. CLJ2 003. Unreasonable searches and seizures during patrol functions. Welcome back. Today we discuss unreasonable searches and seizure during patrol functions and how it can be prevented. Let us start. What is the patrol function? The patrol function of the Philippine National Police (PNP) is a core activity that focuses on the visible presence of police personnel in communities to deter crime, enforce laws, and provide assistance to the public. This function is critical to maintaining public order and safety. The main objectives of the PNP patrol function include 1. Crime prevention and deterrence. By patrolling communities, the police aim to prevent the occurrence of crimes by increasing the perceived risk of apprehension for potential offenders. 2. Law enforcement. Patrol officers are responsible for enforcing laws and ordinances, responding to incidents of crime, and apprehending offenders. 3. Public assistance. Officers on patrol provide assistance to citizens in need, which can range from helping in emergencies to providing information and guidance. 4. Community interaction. Regular patrols enable officers to develop relationships with community members, improving mutual understanding and cooperation. 5. Traffic control. Patrol functions often include managing traffic flow, enforcing traffic laws, and responding to traffic accidents. Overall, the patrol function is vital for the PNP's role in ensuring a safe and secure environment for all citizens. What are spot checks, accosting and pat-down searches? The spot checks, accosting and pat-down searches function of the Philippine National Police (PNP) is a policing tactic used to increase security and deter criminal activity. This function involves several specific actions. 1. Spot checks. These are brief, random checks performed by police officers on individuals or vehicles in specific locations to detect and prevent illegal activities. Spot checks are generally conducted in areas known for higher crime rates or where crime is anticipated. 2. Accosting. This refers to the approach and initial interaction between police officers and individuals during patrols or at checkpoints. The purpose is to question persons about their activities or identity in a manner that conforms to legal standards and respects individual rights. 3. Pat-down searches, also known as frisking. These are quick searches performed on the outer clothing of a person to ensure they are not carrying weapons or contraband. This is typically done when there is a reasonable suspicion based on specific and articulable facts that the person might be armed and dangerous. These procedures are governed by legal standards that aim to balance the need for law enforcement and public safety with the protection of individual civil liberties. The PNP is expected to conduct these activities in accordance with the Philippine Constitution, which protects citizens against unreasonable searches and seizures. Therefore, such activities should only be carried out based on reasonable suspicion supported by specific circumstances, and not arbitrarily. Effective implementation of spot checks, accosting, and pat-down searches can help prevent crimes such as drug trafficking, carrying of illegal weapons, and other public safety threats, contributing to overall community safety and security. Are these procedures legal? Yes, the procedures such as spot checks, accosting, and pat-down searches are legal when conducted within the framework of the laws and regulations governing police conduct in the Philippines. However, their legality is contingent upon adherence to constitutional safeguards against unreasonable searches and seizures, as outlined in the Philippine Constitution, specifically under Article 3, Section 2. To ensure legality, these procedures must meet certain criteria. 1. Reasonable suspicion. Police officers must have a reasonable suspicion based on specific and articulable facts that a person is involved in criminal activity or poses a security threat before conducting an accost or a pat-down search. 2. Proportionality and necessity. The measures taken must be necessary and proportional to the threat or suspicion involved. Officers must not use these powers excessively or without just cause. 3. Respect for rights. All actions taken during spot checks, accosting, and pat-down searches must respect the individual rights of the persons involved. This includes the right to be treated with dignity and the right to privacy, ensuring that searches are not more intrusive than necessary. 4. Non-discrimination. Actions must not be based on race, ethnicity, religion, gender, or other discriminatory factors. When conducted properly, these procedures are tools intended to enhance public safety and deter crime. However, misuse or abuse of these powers can lead to violations of civil rights and potentially illegal actions. In practice, the application of these procedures can sometimes lead to controversies or complaints, particularly if individuals feel that the actions were unjustified or excessively intrusive. Thus, accountability and clear guidelines are crucial to maintain the legality and appropriateness of these police functions. What is deemed unreasonable search and seizure? In relation to the patrol functions of the Philippine National Police, PNP, unreasonable searches and seizures refer to actions that violate the constitutional protections afforded to individuals under the Philippine Constitution. Specifically, Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution states that people have the right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. This provision requires that any search or seizure conducted by law enforcement must be reasonable, and generally, it must be supported by a warrant issued by a judge on the basis of probable cause. In the context of patrol functions, searches and seizures could be deemed unreasonable if they lack 1. Probable cause. If the police conduct searches or seizures without probable cause, and that is, without a reasonable ground to believe that a person has committed a crime, the action can be considered unreasonable. 2. Warrant. The general rule is that searches and seizures must be conducted with a warrant. However, there are exceptions where warrantless searches are considered reasonable, such as during exigent circumstances, example, hot pursuit, imminent danger, when the evidence is in plain view, or when the search is incident to a lawful arrest. 3. Specificity and scope. Even with probable cause, the extent of the search must be limited to what is specified in the warrant, or to what is reasonable under the circumstances during a warrantless search. Overreaching in the scope of a search can render it unreasonable. 4. Respect for rights. Any search or seizure must respect the rights of individuals to privacy and dignity. Searches or seizures that are excessively intrusive beyond what is justified by the circumstances can be considered unreasonable. In patrol activities, officers must carefully balance the need to enforce the law and maintain public safety with the need to respect individual constitutional rights. The definition of what constitutes an unreasonable search or seizure can vary based on specific circumstances, and sometimes, cases involving alleged unreasonable searches and seizures by the PNP may end up in the judiciary to determine the legality of those actions. This legal safeguard is vital to ensure that the power of law enforcement is exercised justly and within the bounds of the law. Illustration of violations against unreasonable searches and seizures. There have been various reported instances and public controversies where the conduct of police officers during patrols was alleged to involve violations of constitutional rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. Here are 5 types of scenarios. Based on general public knowledge and reported incidents where such violations could potentially occur. 1. Warrantless searches of vehicles. There have been incidents where PNP officers conducted searches of vehicles without a warrant, probable cause, or any of the legally recognized exceptions, such as consent, exigent circumstances, or the vehicle being impounded lawfully. Searches conducted under these conditions could violate constitutional protections. 2. Stop and frisk without reasonable suspicion. While stop and frisk policies allow officers to pat down individuals for weapons if they have reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and dangerous, there have been allegations of PNP officers conducting these searches without the requisite suspicion, based merely on profiling or presence in a certain area. 3. Raiding homes without a warrant. There are reports of the PNP raiding homes without warrants, especially in operations aimed at cracking down on illegal drugs. These raids are sometimes based on unreliable informant tips without proper verification or legal authority. 4. Excessive force during pat-downs. Use of excessive force during a search not only raises concerns about assault but also about the reasonableness and scope of the search itself. If a pat-down meant to check for weapons turns into an invasive search, it might overstep legal boundaries. 5. Arbitrary checkpoints and searches. Setting up checkpoints and conducting arbitrary searches of passers-by without any specific intelligence or suspicion can also lead to violations. While checkpoints are legally permissible under certain conditions, they must be conducted in a manner that minimizes inconvenience and does not infringe on individual freedoms without justification. These scenarios reflect the delicate balance between effective law enforcement and the protection of individual rights. Allegations of such violations often lead to judicial scrutiny and sometimes result in the imposition of sanctions against the officers involved if the searches or seizures are found to be unconstitutional. These cases also underscore the importance of training and guidelines to ensure that PNP officers comply with legal standards during their patrol functions. Exclusionary rule and fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. The exclusionary rule and the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine are fundamental legal principles that have significant implications for law enforcement, including the patrol functions of the Philippine National Police (PNP). These doctrines aim to ensure that police conduct during patrols and other activities adhere to constitutional protections, particularly regarding illegal searches and seizures. Exclusionary rule. The exclusionary rule is a legal principle that prohibits evidence obtained in violation of a defendant's constitutional rights from being used in a court of law. This rule is primarily aimed at deterring police misconduct by denying the prosecution the ability to use evidence gathered through illegal methods, thereby incentivizing law enforcement to operate within the bounds of the law. In the context of the PNP's patrol functions, this means that any evidence officers obtain through unlawful searches or seizures cannot be used in court. For instance, if a PNP officer conducts a search of a vehicle without a warrant, probable cause, or a valid exception, any contraband or evidence found during that search would typically be inadmissible in court under the exclusionary rule. Fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. This doctrine is an extension of the exclusionary rule. It states that not only is evidence obtained directly from a constitutional violation inadmissible, but also any further evidence derived from the initially illegally obtained evidence. The metaphor of the poisonous tree refers to the initial illegal act, and the fruit refers to any subsequent information or evidence that stems from that act. For example, if a PNP officer illegally searches a home and finds a key to a locker, and the locker contains illegal drugs, the drugs would be considered fruit of the poisonous tree and would typically be excluded from trial, assuming no intervening circumstances cleanse the taint. Implications for patrol functions. 1. Training and awareness. Understanding and adhering to these doctrines is crucial for PNP officers. Regular training on legal standards and constitutional rights is essential to ensure that officers know the legal boundaries of their actions during patrols. 2. Conducting searches. Officers must be diligent in ensuring that they have lawful grounds for searches and seizures. This includes having a warrant when required, ensuring there is probable cause, or clearly falling within an exception to the warrant requirement. 3. Evidence collection. Officers must be mindful of the chain of evidence collection, ensuring that each step, from the initial search or seizure to subsequent investigations, is legally sound to avoid the potential exclusion of critical evidence. 4. Accountability. These doctrines help ensure accountability in police practices. They motivate law enforcement agencies to monitor their procedures and conduct internal audits to ensure compliance with legal standards. By integrating respect for these doctrines into everyday patrol functions, the PNP can enhance the integrity and effectiveness of its operations, reduce instances of misconduct, and improve community trust and cooperation. These legal principles not only protect the rights of individuals but also reinforce the rule of law within the community. Accountability for violation. Legal accountability for violations of rights against unreasonable searches and seizures typically involves several processes. 1. Internal review and administrative actions. Often, when there are allegations of misconduct during patrol functions, the cases are first subject to internal review by the PNP Internal Affairs Service, which can lead to administrative sanctions. 2. Criminal charges. In more severe cases, criminal charges may be filed if there is sufficient evidence that officers acted beyond their legal authority in a manner that constitutes a criminal offense. 3. Civil litigation. Victims of unlawful searches and seizures can also file civil suits against the officers involved and the police organization for damages. In broader terms, raising public awareness and holding law enforcement accountable through legal means are crucial steps toward ensuring that police practices adhere to constitutional standards and respect individual rights. Valid warrantless search and seizure. In the context of law enforcement, including the patrol functions of the Philippine National Police, PNP, there are several circumstances under which warrantless searches and seizures are considered valid and legal. These exceptions are carefully outlined in legal frameworks and are intended to balance the need for effective law enforcement with the protection of individual rights. Here are some key situations where warrantless searches and seizures might be legally justified during police patrols. 1. Consent searches. If an individual voluntarily consents to a search of their person, vehicle, or property, the PNP can conduct a search without a warrant. Consent must be freely given, not coerced or implied from a non-voluntary compliance. 2. Plain view doctrine. This allows an officer to seize evidence and contraband that are clearly visible from a place where the officer has a right to be. For example, if an officer stops a vehicle for a traffic violation and sees illegal drugs on the passenger seat, the drugs can be seized without a warrant. 3. Search incident to a lawful arrest. When the PNP lawfully arrests someone, officers may search the person and the immediate area within the arrestee's control to ensure there are no weapons that could endanger the officer and to secure evidence that the arrestee might destroy. 4. Exigent circumstances. In situations where waiting to secure a warrant would either jeopardize public safety or lead to the destruction of evidence, the police are allowed to conduct a search without a warrant. For instance, entering a home without a warrant might be justified to prevent the destruction of evidence or in hot pursuit of a fleeing suspect. 5. Automobile exception. Due to the inherent mobility of vehicles and the lesser expectation of privacy in motor vehicles, officers can search a vehicle without a warrant if they have probable cause to believe it contains evidence of a crime. This exception recognizes that the time required to obtain a warrant might result in the vehicle being moved and the evidence being lost. 6. Stop and frisk. Based on the Terry v. Ohio, 1968 U.S. Supreme Court decision, police may stop and frisk individuals without a warrant if they have reasonable suspicion that the person is armed and presently dangerous. This is designed to protect the officer's safety during an encounter. Legal considerations. Each of these exceptions is subject to specific legal tests regarding the reasonableness of the officer's actions, based on the information available at the time. The burden is on law enforcement to prove that the warrantless search or seizure falls within one of these exceptions. Philippine law mirrors these principles, ensuring that while law enforcement officers can act promptly, when necessary, they also respect and uphold the rights of individuals against unreasonable searches and seizures. In practice, the PNP must ensure that officers are well trained and knowledgeable about these exceptions to effectively perform their duties within the legal boundaries. This helps prevent potential abuses and ensures that evidence collected during warrantless searches can withstand legal scrutiny and be admissible in court. Victims of unlawful searches and seizures can also file civil suits against the officers involved and the police organization for damages. In broader terms, raising public awareness and holding law enforcement accountable through legal means are crucial steps toward ensuring that police practices adhere to constitutional standards and respect individual rights. Conclusion. In conclusion, the patrol functions of the Philippine National Police (PNP), including spot checks, accosting, and pat-down searches, are essential tools in crime prevention and law enforcement. These activities are designed to ensure public safety while respecting individual rights as mandated by the Philippine Constitution. However, the effectiveness of these functions depends on their strict adherence to legal standards and constitutional safeguards against unreasonable searches and seizures. Instances of misconduct and the misuse of authority highlight the critical need for continued training, accountability, and transparent enforcement of legal norms within the PNP. Upholding these standards is vital not only for maintaining public trust but also for protecting the civil liberties of individuals. As the PNP navigates the complex balance between security and freedom, it must rigorously apply the principles of reasonable suspicion, proportionality, respect for rights, and non-discrimination to all its operations. Furthermore, the doctrines of the exclusionary rule and the fruit of the poisonous tree serve as essential checks on police powers, ensuring that evidence obtained through unlawful means does not undermine the justice system. By adhering to these principles, the PNP can enhance its operational integrity, reduce instances of misconduct, and improve community trust and cooperation, thereby reinforcing the rule of law and democratic governance in the Philippines. That is it for our lecture. Thank you for listening. This is Mr. Moslina. Have a good day.